Okay, our next presenter is a friend of mine that I've known for some years. He's a member of the World Explorers Club. His name is Doug Nason. He's an anthropologist. He owns a popular art gallery in Los Angeles called the Nason Gallery. He's the author of a number of books. His first book was called Night of the Tiki, published by Last Gasp. His second book was called Rat Fink, The Art of Big Daddy Roth, also published by Last Gasp, and his new book that's coming out is called Von Dutch, An American Dream. And so a warm welcome now for Doug Nason.
Thanks, David. It's really a pleasure to speak in front of such a distinguished group and among such great scholars and sages. So hopefully this will be a little bit of levity and a little bit of intellectualism. And the topic is Tiki. I first became interested in Tiki when I was about 7 years old, and my uncle came back from Haiti and brought me a little trinket voodoo doll. I was very fascinated with this anthropomorphic, primitive, rudimentary, bare bones, image of a human. And around the same time, my parents would take me out to a restaurant called Kilbo's, and it was a Polynesian-themed, real tacky, nautical, maritime restaurant, but it was anchored by several of these icons, these tiki icons, these wooden effigies. And my parents enjoyed it because they could drink some fancy tropical drinks, and there's enough stuff in there for me to be entertained, getting lost amongst the nautical decor in the place. And so that's kind of what set me off in this journey on tikis. And then when I got into college, I majored in anthropology, in particular interested in these anthropomorphic forms. And finally, when I got out of school and had enough money to start traveling, I went to the Pacific a lot and was able to look at some tikis in their natural element. Move on to the next one. Before we go into the Pacific, I want to just talk a little bit about what I call a Tiki Americana component, which was these tiki bars that were popular after our boys got back from World War II, and then a new resurgence in what I call Tiki primitivism, which is new artists, contemporary artists doing tiki images. This image is called Tiki Bars by an artist that we work with named the Piz. And this one's called Taboo, and it's by an artist named Von Franco. This is the cover of my first book, which we called Night of the Tiki, and basically this shows the three schools, at least the three schools that I believe that Tiki is. The first component, the Tongaroa here from the Cook Islands, these are all Tongaroa images, but this is the traditional one with the traditional tattoos on it, and that's a Cook Islands image that we'll be getting into in a little while. But that represents what I call Tiki traditional, the traditional icons of the Pacific, which this lecture is about. The other two schools this is the Tiki Americana. This is a Leroy Schmaltz who single-handedly decorated several tiki bars during the 1950s and 60s. He also did a set of Gilligan's Island and all kinds of TV and motion pictures, and he's been decorating tiki or Polynesian-themed things for the last 40 years. And finally, the new school of tiki art, the tiki contemporary primitivism, represented by an artist named Shag, who's phenomenally popular, and our gallery is very fortunate to work with. And then I need to first talk a little bit about the romantic notion. Obviously, as most people in this room, I need to tell you my slant is I'm definitely a diffusionist. I believe the world is a very small place, and modern or primitive man was getting around a lot easier than most academics believe. But my other bias is I am a romantic. I believe in the noble savage, Rousseau, and the noble savage as opposed to the ethnocentrism that was going on in the 1800s and 1900s in the European expansion. So finally, we're here in the Marquesas. The Marquesas Islands, I wanted to begin here. This is the land of Tiki. The word Tiki is from the Marquesas, and the word tattoo is also from the Marquesas. This is the biggest Tiki in the world, the biggest ancient Tiki in the world outside of Easter Island. And this Tiki is called Takai. And here's another view. Tiki was a great example of mythology meeting history. Tiki is really the confluence or the crossroads of oceanic art, history, and religion. It's kind of just the icon that represents all these meetings coming into one icon. Tiki, here you see how big it is. There I am standing next to him. Tiki was a famous king that lived at least 500 or 600 years ago, and he was such a powerful king and such a strong warrior that when he died, they deified him into this tiki, and that's basically what tikis are. They could be a representation of a leader of a lineage, or they could be a representative of something between man and God, an intermediary, or a representation of God himself. This Takai Tiki in the Marquesas, again, it was a living man. They deified him, and now he's something akin to a god. And this is the same site in Hula in the southern Marquesas Islands. Right standing next to Takai are two very unique tikis. This one's actually laying on its belly, and some believe it's a female tiki, possibly giving birth. It's a very unique tiki in front, and the tiki in back this whole site was excavated by Thor Heyerdahl in the late 1950s. And unfortunately, the head of the one in back here, the head now the real head is believed to be in a museum in Germany. But this head seemed to fit on the form fine. But this site is called Puamau, and it's a very important tiki site in the Marquesas. And this is another example. This is also on the same island of Hivaoa in the southern Marquesas, but it's a great example of the mythology and the folklore behind tiki. Just like in America, we might have like tall tales, like say Paul Bunyan, was like this lumberjack that was probably a real guy at some time, and just through myths and folklore and the quote tall tales, he became he became a giant and just a very important figure. And that's kind of the way some of these deified tikis became. This is called the Moeone tiki, and it's just a small tiki. It sits on a mare, or in the Marquesas they call them mies, and they're the open air temples that are found throughout Polynesia, especially eastern Polynesia. And this tiki has lots of folklore surrounding it. It sits out above the ocean, but one story is that it will go down to the ocean at nighttime and sleep on the sand. Moeone actually means sleep sand in Marquesan. And then before everybody gets up in the morning, it goes back up to its mie home. It's also called the fisherman's tiki because when the fish aren't biting, sometimes the fishermen will actually take it down to the beach, and the tiki supposedly mysteriously points in the direction where the fish are biting. And there's a lot of different stories. Some people, of course, you've probably heard stories like this before, but some people have said they posed next to it, like 20 years back. The tiki has so much mana that when they developed the film, the person standing next to it came out fine, but the tiki mysteriously didn't appear in the photography. This is a lot of folklore associated with this tiki. This tiki sits now in the Gauguin Museum, which is on the island of Tahiti in the Society Islands. It's one of the largest ancient stone tikis, again, outside of the Easter Island. And it's made of the red volcanic tuff, which most of the tikis are made of this red tuff, the ancient tikis, because red was a sacred color in ancient Polynesia, as in other cultures too, a symbol of royalty. So this tiki has a lot of folklore associated with it. We have another picture coming up too.
Is that like a granitic stone?
Pardon?
Is it granite?
It's volcanic.
Yeah,
But it's a softer stone.
Yeah, it's soft. It's a tuff, yeah.
It's not real hard.
Go on there. I have another picture, Walter.
So, like, Doug, all these have this mana, they're all alive, they have this energy, right?
Right.
Or some
No, well, as the religion gets more and more watered down, it gets more westernized, some of the tikis still believe they have this mana. Polynesian religion, there's two things that are integral to it. One is the concept of mana, which is a sacred energy that can be transferred, and it can be transferred from say inanimate types of objects, say a tiki, to a biological a person, and it free flows. And it's like almost like some of the tikis. Another thing that tikis could be is a vessel to hold this mana. Closely associated with mana is the concept of tapu. which our word taboo comes from. And tapu is basically it's something that has so much this mana, or so much this sacred energy, that it really belongs to a royal class of people, and it's something that shouldn't be messed with. And that's why tikis lots of times are found on sacred ground, and they demarcate sacred places. They're found in these open air temples called the Marai or the Mie, and lots of times they are perceived to have bad luck, which this tiki, again, this is in the Gauguin Museum in Tahiti, but it was originally from the Austral island of Raivive. And when they brought, in 1933, they loaded this tiki up along with the next one, Walter, along with this smaller one. The smaller one here is male, and the first one I show you is a female, and they loaded them up on a boat in the Raivive harbor, and they also put their child, there's a smaller tiki, on the same boat. Now, when this boat took off, the child, the smallest tiki, fell in the water, and the natives at that time said, "That's it. The tiki wanted to stay on our island so bad, you can't get this tiki," and they left it underwater until just about 2 months ago. That's a different story. I'll get to that soon. But then the boat took off with these 2 big tikis to Tahiti, and when they docked into Papeete, which is the main town of Tahiti, they couldn't get any Tahitians to unload these tikis because, of course, they had so much tapu, or so much mana, that the Tahitians knew that they were imbued, and they could cause bad luck, because they were probably upset because they were taken from their natural environment. And so finally they found some Marquesan islanders, and they unloaded them. And then there's all kinds of, this is going back to the 1930s, there's all kinds of mysterious stories that the people that unloaded it died that night. When they finally got them over to the Gauguin Museum, where they reside now, there's been stories that when they had the inauguration of the museum, that that day the gardener quit his job, and then that night the person that worked in the gift shop mysteriously lost their life. So the story now is that the museum doesn't need to lock their doors, because nobody's going to go over there at nighttime because these tikis are there.
Well, and don't they almost think that this one tiki murdered that girl?
Right. There's another story. I'm glad you brought that up. There's another story where this is sitting actually right in front of a real beautiful part of the ocean, and that a woman went there and completely disrespectfully disrobed and put her garments, just draped her garments over the tiki while she went swimming. And then supposedly, like, there's all kinds of stories. Again, I mean, the most simplest story is that she started having so much bad luck that she had to bring her family back and her elders back, and they had to do a ceremony in front of the tiki. Now, the most extreme story I heard, and it could be true, is that she died that night after she draped her clothes. But again, you have this thing. I should probably talk about the oral tradition. We talked a little bit about that yesterday with the Egyptians. Polynesia is a place where, with the possible exception of the Rongo writing that David brought up in his lecture yesterday in Easter Island, is a place that has a very strong oral tradition, but they did not necessarily have writing. And so the oral tradition, it's a very good way to pass down knowledge. Like the Vedic system in India, is a thousands and thousands of year old tradition where very detailed knowledge is passed down in the way of rhymes and limericks and passages that are memorized verbatim. And also ancestor worship is tied up in that same thing. They pass down, like I met one guy in the Cook Islands that could recite his ancestors, by memory going back to the 1300s. And so, it's very, very disciplined thing, but this ancestor worship, this oral history is very important. But, the downside of that is possibility, kind of like the Paul Bunyan I was talking about earlier. You talk about something so much, and you might overemphasize, some of the traits, and pretty soon somebody that was a great man might have become a great king, or might become a great god. So that's the kind of oral tradition. Keep going. So having started off the Austral Islands, I was very lucky. I was just there 2 months ago, and the day I got there was the day that they pulled the tiki up out of the harbor after it had been there since 1933. This is called Raivive. They just put an airport in about a year ago, and I wanted to get there before the tourists did, because it's one of the most beautiful islands I've ever been to. I'm sure they're going to set up a tourist infrastructure. But right now, there's no infrastructure for tourism. I had to stay in someone's home, and I was very lucky to go there. This picture is taken of the island. I'm standing on a motu. Motu is a little tiny sandy island that's part of the reef system that surrounds a lot of these tropical islands. But it was just paradise. It was so beautiful.
Did you get special permission to go to that island, or can you just go there?
No, I don't speak French very well, so I had a friend of mine that spoke French, and I made a contact with somebody that I found out about, from Papiete, was renting rooms out of her house, and so she set it up for me to stay in somebody's house. This is the last tiki. This isn't the one that was underwater. This is the very last tiki that is on Raivive, and it still stands. Like I said, after that one tiki fell overboard or jumped overboard, they say, they don't allow any more tikis to leave the island. But this island was really amazing because you just start going hiking in the bushes, and you find all kinds of archaeological remnants, and which I'm sure that some were these ancient Maori sites. Now we're moving over to the Caroline Islands. This is a Tino figure. It's very Picasso-esque. In fact, in contemporary art, there is a school called Primitivism, and Picasso, of course, was one of these artists. And there was a show in New York called Primitivism, and the show actually, I thought it was one of the most incredible art shows ever, but it was not well received because it showed how contemporary artists literally steal a lot of these primitive icons and made millions on it. And I mean, even Picasso, what's that quote by Picasso? He said, bad artists copy, good artists or great artists steal. So this is part, it's very Picasso-esque, and this is a very rudimentary, crude form called Tino. Try that again. I might have slipped. Okay, this is the Tongaroa figure that I had on the cover of my Tiki book. It's the Cook Islands, the god of the sea, their fisherman's god. Very important. Tongaroa, Ta'aroa, it's the supreme god all over Western Polynesia and most of Eastern Polynesia as well. And basically, the head is very distinctive in that the eyes and the mouth have a certain number of lines. And another definition of Tiki is really a totemic coat of arms, which like Durkheim always talked about, man and his totems. Basically, it's a coat of arms, just like the Europeans have their family name. This is something that can be traced back to the first ancestors. So it's a very distinctive, 5 lines in the eyes and 4 lines in the mouth. They mount these to the front of their canoe on the prow, and that literally becomes a flag. It represents, anybody could identify, oh, there's so-and-so from Rarotonga, Tongaroa from Rarotonga Island. The basic form of the tiki, there's many definitions. The Loxtines they're very squat with big bellies. The belly is also sacred in a lot of Polynesian imagery, and the hands are oftentimes clasped over the belly or on its side. I've been told that if the hands are clasped or holding, it means they're holding on to their culture. They have a very rich culture that, that lots of times the kids want to become more like Madonna and the Western people. So I try to talk to the elders about the original culture. So the hands symbolize holding on to the culture. The bent knee, David mentioned yesterday, the Kuzo posture. This is a universal posture found, from Africa to New Guinea to the Pacific to a lot of Latin American art. You see these bent legs. I've done a lot of research on what these bent legs mean. The first answer I usually get is the bent legs symbolize reverence. Sometimes, depending on the type of image, the bent legs could represent aggressiveness or like ready to pounce on your opponent. But the usual answer I get is praying or respect, that type of thing. The phallus. Many of these tikis pre-Western contact, of course, the mana, that was part of the fertility, and many of them are depicted with outstretched tongues or overly developed vulvae or penises, and this is just a natural thing before missionary contact. There was no negative connotations placed on sex. It was part of the creation. All right. Again, this is a Marquesan figure with the overly emphasized penis. This is a very traditional Marquesan tiki, and which kind of ties into a little bit about what we talked about here. The telltale sign for Marquesan tiki is these goggles around the eyes that some people, like in the Eric von Däniken school, might perceive as being a symbol for some sort of extraterrestrial. All right. And then, of course, the matriarch, I believe that some of the earliest tikis were female tikis. This is a female Marquesan tiki that I commissioned when I was there. And the Marquesan, the wood carving is phenomenal. This is the the oceanic rosewood, which is a beautiful wood, and you can see the carving. There's also the Marquesans, believe it or not, before Western contact. Of course, they had the cross too. That's the Marquesan cross. And it's a universal symbol throughout the Marquesan. Again, it's like the coat of arms for the Marquesans. But the female form is found on a lot of the most ancient tikis. I should say right now, too, is I believe the oldest tikis or possibly the oldest sculptures of mankind were most likely wood, because wood was easier to carve than stone. But we see the reason we see the most ancient stones is because, of course, stone lasts longer than wood, especially in a tropical, moist environment like the Pacific. Okay, this is a detail of the Vahini. Pardon?
I'm just saying it's gorgeous.
Yeah, isn't it nice? It's the Vahini means female or woman in Tahitian or Polynesian, and this is what I call a Vahini tiki. But it is gorgeous. It's just incredible wood carving.
Doug, have you ever asked them about these goggle eyes and why the big eyes? Do they have?
You know what? If they ask so many questions, but next time I go there, I'm going to ask that one. Anyway, another thing, just like the word tiki is from the Marquesans, the word tattoo is also from the Marquesans. They have the most famous tattooing in the world, and of course the tiki design is integral to the tattoos, and most of the tattoos, the traditional tattoos, tell a story. Go on. This is in the island of Fatu Hiva. I don't know if you Thor Heyerdahl fans in the audience probably recognize the word Fatu Hiva. That was the name of Thor Heyerdahl's second book, which really he experienced before Kon-Tiki. And basically, when Thor Heyerdahl first got out of school and he got married to his first wife, Eve, he wanted to go back to nature. He wanted to be this noble savage thing, and he didn't realize that he was going to go on and do such great stuff because he just wanted to drop out of Western civilization. So he scoured the world for the place that he wanted to live his whole life, and he found this little island in the southern Marquesas called Fatu Hiva. And he moved there, and he actually lived there for a year, thinking he was going to live there for the rest of his life. But the mosquito infestation was just so harsh, which I could agree to, that he found that indeed there is some trouble in paradise. So he moved from there. And then he went on to do Kon-Tiki and all the great stuff that he did.
Didn't he also, there was something happened to him where he had to escape that island, like they were trying to get him?
Right. That's a whole story. But if you want to read if you've read Kon-Tiki and like that, Fatu Hiva is a wonderful book. These are the best tattoo artists in another southern Marquesas island called Tuatha. And these are the Fahey brothers. They're known to be the best tattoo artists. And Felix Fahey in the middle, I waited 20 years. I only had one tattoo, and he gave it to me. Okay? All right. Yeah, after the show. After the. Again, traditionally the tiki carving is done by males, but the females have as equally beautiful, if not more beautiful, art form, which is this tapa bark, and they have different kinds of tapa. Tapa is actually they use it for materials, and they make clothes out of it, and it's found throughout Polynesia and Micronesia, and a little bit in Melanesia, and also in Indonesia. And it's incredible. Ironically, we probably look at the design first. To them, the design is secondary. The cloth is what's really the quality product. This is a traditional Marquesan design that shows a traditional full-body tattoo, and this is also on the island of Fatu Hiva, which is known to have the nicest tapa cloth in the world.
And that's a Vahini, right?
That's a Vahini. I think that's a male.
They actually have love sticks there? He's holding a love stick. I thought that was indigenous to Palau.
This stick?
That's a love stick. Yeah.
That would be a club or a spear, but those designs, like especially the concentric designs.
That's a love stick.
Okay.
Yeah, that's interesting.
You know, I know the love sticks, but I think that is a spear.
Something
But the love
different.
sticks are like that.
Yeah.
That is also a famous Russian old print.
Right.
That's
Yes.
also in the book.
But
It's redone.
it's also interesting because you see these concentric circles, and this is another what I believe is a archetypical design where you have these circles facing each other. You see it all around the world, but especially in New Guinea and Melanesian art.
And what is that on the head, like horns?
That's like a hairstyle that they did traditionally. Okay, Walter. This is on Fatu Hiva. I just like this picture. I was walking around. It was raining. I was kind of bummed out. I was my first day there. I didn't know anyone, and all of a sudden, you know, this lady comes running out of her house and she starts yelling "Tiki, Tiki," you know, and so I went over, and this is a tiki that her husband carved, and I like this shot because it actually you can see the Fatu Hiva written on the crate down there. All right. This is Hanevave Bay, which is also on Fatu Hiva. You can see why Thor Heyerdahl chose this place to live. But what's interesting is the natural rock formations, the simulacrae, the similar natural formation that basically looks like tiki. And supposedly, we're going to get into Easter Island in just a minute, but supposedly the people that went on to inhabitate Easter Island started the Marquesas. And guess what? I say that looks like a moai. Next one. And there's another picture of the same. It looks like a moai, doesn't it? And just a gorgeous place, Fatu Hiva. Next slide. There's another rock that also looks like a moai that's also there. Next.
Was that just something you noticed, or is that known to resemble?
They're famous rock formations, but I thought they looked like tikis. Anyway, a quick overview of the Pacific. The Polynesia, you have what's called the Polynesian Triangle, which starts off in the north in Hawaii, and it goes down to about Fiji. Where's Fiji? About right there. And then it crosses all the way over to Easter Island, and then back up. So this is called the Polynesian Triangle, one of the largest places on Earth. Micronesia, which is micro means small, and is basically, the Polynesia and Micronesia, the same source of people. I mean, they're basically the best sailors in the world, and there's three different theories that I just want to briefly present to you. The most academically accepted theory is that they migrated out of Southeast Asia, possibly. One theory is they started around Taiwan and went over to the Philippines, and then came down in boats and through a strong desire of trading or possibly warfare, gradually migrated out in the Pacific. Now there's some people that say they went out to Micronesia first. That's called the Micronesian route. There's other people that say Indonesia was the homeland, and there's also theories that we could talk about all day that Indonesia might be the real Atlantis and that they came out of Indonesia and they came across the sea, either the Micronesian route or the Melanesian route, bypassing New Guinea. You find the Austronesian language, which is the largest language group in the world. And the Austronesian language, believe it or not, it goes all the way to Madagascar, which would be over here off the coast of Africa, all the way to Easter Island. And the Austronesian language, that's linguistics. That's why anthropologists believe that this was probably the way they migrated. The other theory, the Thor Heyerdahl theory, is that there was a South American connection. South America would be over here, and that at least some of the Pacific was populated by way of South America, which I definitely believe there was a connection. Thor Heyerdahl showed in his art of Easter Island that there was many commonalities, the Cusio posture amongst them, the hand placement we were going over earlier. Why don't we flip the slide? This is a maritime culture, and obviously the tiki builders came through Indonesia. This is the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, the central part of the island, and this is definitely a tiki. So the tiki builders definitely passed through here. Next.
That is huge.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? Yeah. In fact, I was going to propose that we should travel there.
Yeah.
And then this is all the way over to Peru. This is Machu Picchu. This is a little trinket I picked up in Cusco, and I hiked up to Machu Picchu, brought it with me, set up the coca leaves, and basically this would be akin to what Thor Heyerdahl called Kon-Tiki, or otherwise known as Viracocha Kon-Tiki. Go on to the next slide. The Kon-Tiki would be the bearded sun god. There's a lot of books. David's catalog, has some great books on Kon-Tiki, or Viracocha is one of the titles he has. And basically, Thor Heyerdahl believed that the Tiki here in Tiwanaku, Bolivia, was the same that they had in the Marquesas, and it was basically the sun god that was worshipped, from South America into the Pacific, and this is interesting. When I was there last year with David, I asked some locals all about this. One person told me it was a female wearing this bearded mask to show the male female component of man. And it's hard to see in this slide, but it has very interesting hand placement, which they were telling me was significant too. The seafaring expeditions. This is a boat that was in Lake Titicaca that David was talking about yesterday too. The reed boats. Thor Heyerdahl proved that they're very efficient sailing vessels, and that the reed also grows. You can find it on Easter Island in the craters. And so the Polynesians could have been building boats like this as they did in the Ra expeditions coming from Egypt and in Lake Titicaca. This is a really neat boat I found in Marquesas, but it shows a seafaring expedition. What's really unique is look at this guy out here, the prisoner, on the back of the boat. Here's a close-up of the prisoner there on the back of the boat. Next. And this is incredible. This is the island of Tonga. This is a seafaring boat that traveled all around the Pacific. There's not one piece of metal in this boat. Of course, the Polynesian culture was Neolithic. They did not have benefit of the use of metal until the Westerners showed up, but they were perfectly fine. They built these seafaring vessels, and the Micronesians and the Polynesians, again, were the best sailors in the world. Now it comes to my third theory. I've already talked about the Asian theory and the South American theory. So I try to seek out old timers for my research, and so I met this guy on a ferry going over to Savaiaki, the big main island in Samoa. And I started a conversation with this gentleman, and after I get to know somebody, I always go, well, do you believe your ancestors are from the East or from the West? And this guy gave me a very novel answer. He said we're not from either, we're from above. And so Savaiaki is very close to the term Hawaii, and Hawaii is believed to be the ancestral homeland of the mythological, at least, ancestral homeland of the Polynesians, which is up.
Yeah, and Doug, I mentioned yesterday how also in Samoa the ancient Samoan kings lived on Manoa, and they supposedly could fly, and they flew from island to island.
Right, well that's up too. Yeah. Yeah. All right, I'm Great. But the kava chewing is common throughout the Western Pacific. Okay, next.
I've had kava. Crazy stuff. It's like drinking Novocaine.
Right.
First your lips go numb, then your cheeks go numb, then your fingertips and your toes, and pretty soon you try to stand up and you just fall over.
Right. And Micronesia is known to have the best kava too.
I got that big bowl at home.
Okay, great. This, a lot of people don't associate the Pacific with megalithic construction either. Now, these are called the Langis. These are incredible. They're not quite where Cusco or Egypt is, but people don't know it. This stuff's out in the Pacific too. These is called a Langi. It's like basically a base of the pyramids. Now, some people think there were structures on top of them, and they're not sure. Some people say that they're grave sites, but there's a lot of other explanations for them too. But these are big, massive, blocks of coral that supposedly they got from an island that was 800 miles away, and they put double-hulled canoes together to transport them. This is also in Tonga. This is some more of the carving. This is a whale's tooth. It's a traditional figure. Just another common archetype is these diametrically opposed figures called Janus images. You find these types of images all over the world, and I think it has to do with the Taoism or like the male-female element. This is an exquisite carving. This is a close-up of the top of that swordfish sword that I showed you on an earlier slide, but you can see the tiki-like image very finely carved in it. This is a close-up of the Langi. Now again, the construction, it doesn't have the notched grooves like you saw at the valley temple next to the Sphinx or like what you saw in Cusco, but you do look at that. There is definitely a key cut in there, and these are pretty serious megaliths here. And another view of the Langi. And then again, they have they have a kind of miniature Stonehenge right here in Tonga too, and this is definitely astronomically oriented. And there's another picture, and it's a pretty significant archaeology. This right there in Tonga that a lot of people don't know about. In fact, I think on the back of David's your logo on the back of your shirt, it has the
that's right on the T-shirt.
Called
the manga stone there.
Yeah, the trilithion. This I'm showing. This is right near the trilithion site. And remember, I was talking about the different theories of the bent knee to Cusio posture. I came up with another theory on why they have bent knees in Tonga, and the Tongans that I talked to just love my theory. Basically, this is a famous rock, and one of the Tui Tonga is like the kings, the past king lineages of Tonga. One of them was known to be very mean and was very mean to their slave workers. And while they were building some of this megalithic construction, he was known to have to stand with his back against the stone because he'd always be hitting his slaves. Now, where he'd be hitting his slaves was in their knee. So I told him, well, maybe one of the reasons why tikis have these bent legs is because they're running around, because they're holding on their knees because this king was striking them in the knee. All right, next. This is an important place. This is in Fiji, and this is where the Lapita pottery, this is the farthest west the Lapita pottery has been traced. The anthropologists that believe in the Asian migrations have traced similar pottery shards all the way from the Philippines and Southeast Asia, all the way through Melanesia into the Pacific and then here into Fiji.
How old is Lapita pottery supposed to be?
Definitely BC. I don't.
3,000 years. Yeah, 1,000 BC.
Yeah. Okay.
So
next.
pretty old.
Yeah, definitely old. This is Fijian. Fijian is a little bit Melanesian, a little bit of Micronesian, a little bit of Polynesian. It's very much of a crossroads place in the Pacific, and you can see that a lot of their art is definitely like Polynesian or Micronesian. This is a bowl that they use to put the moni or the sacred coconut oil in, but it's definitely a tiki sort of figure. And our diffusionist in the room, it almost looks like a Sasquatch type of figure too. Okay.
Son of Kong.
Right. And this is another Fijian, a real nice carving. This is a traditional food hook. You can see the big plate here. This was to avoid they could hang food from these hooks down here, and then the rats and rodents couldn't get to the food, so they'd hang their food off of these types of hooks. And then, of course, you've heard of the cannibalism. This is a cannibal fork. Again, the cannibalism was really associated with Fiji, but in a way, it was found in a lot of Melanesian islands, and this is known as the cannibal's fork. Again, they had the concept of mana as well, and there was so much mana in their food that they weren't allowed to touch it, so they had to use a special fork. And now we're out into the Cook Islands. This is sailing out to a motu, which are those little tiny islets that surround these tropical islands. This is I have this slide in here because this is the prow of the canoe I was on. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a tiki, but the old traditional canoes, this is where you find those tikis that I said were like the coat of arms, right here on the prow. And then this is a Tongan, another female form. If you can't tell, I'm partial to the female forms, so I try to have a lot of them in this presentation. This is from the island called Atutake, which is in the Cook Islands, and it's called the Atutake goddess. And then the Cook Islanders, especially in Atutake and Rarotonga, they pride themselves on having the fastest dancing in all the Pacific. And it's really incredible that if you go there, the music is just slightly faster than the Hawaiians and the Tahitians. It's a very fast-paced, frenzy sort of dance, but it's just gorgeous. The Polynesians, well, all the Pacific cultures, very holistic. Everybody took part in the dance and the music and the art. You know, either you made the costumes, you carved the tikis, or you participated with the music and the dance. So it's not like, hey, are you an artist? No, I'm a mathematician. You know, everybody's an artist in a way, a musician or artist. This is a famous Cook Island image from Rarotonga. You have the Tongaroa on top. This is called a staff god, and you can see Tongaroa. He's the leader of the generation, and these are all the ancestors tracing back. And these effigies were burned when the missionaries got there. There's very few of them left, but some of them were as high as 13 feet. Here's a detail of the ancestral lineages on the same carving. This is Michael Taviano. He's the most famous wood carver in all of Cook Islands. Again, there's a Tongaroa figure. These are the famous clubs that Peter Buck cataloged so well. Peter Buck was one of the most famous anthropologists in the Pacific in the early 1900s. But you can see this is a war club, and it's very traditional design. There you have your eye, which is a universal symbol, you know, Egyptian and Pacific and Central American, as well as all over the world. The eye shape, the serrated edges here, tracing it down, and you got a phallic butt end here. Very, very nice craftsmanship. And then now we are on Hawaii now, which is known as Raiatea. If you trace that triangle I showed you, this is smack dab in the middle of the Polynesian triangle. It's called Raiatea. It's on the leeward side of the Society Islands, and it is known to be the ancestral homeland of the Hawaii, of the Polynesians. This is this is the most sacred marae in all the Pacific, and it's known as Tapu Taputea. Notice tapu twice. It's like so sacred you have to say it twice in the name. And this is what Peter Buck called a coronation stone, which is basically upright. Now there's many explanations for these. I believe that these were the first uprights that later on turned into this tiki, into anthropomorphic forms. You know, humankind was looking for an image of God or gods, and this gradually became that. Other people say that there were giants there. The Polynesians were giants, and this stone was used to measure the warrior, and the warriors were 8 feet tall in those days. Next, another shot of the same coronation stone, and you can see up here the uprights. The Maoris here are a little bit different. They had altars in the back of them with these upright stones. And this tiki guards this marae. Now, I went there my first time, and I didn't know this tiki was there. I completely missed it, but I just went there a couple of months ago and found this little tiki. It was only like a 2-foot tall tiki, but it guards the marae. I met an anthropologist there, or archaeologist, and he told me that he snuck a little ship off the back, and he dated that ship, which I find hard to believe, but he says it was 2,000 years old, went back to the time of Christ, this tiki.
Where was that on? Raiatea?
Raiatea, yeah. This is another little tiki that's also on the altar, ancient tiki on the altar in Raiatea, Tapu Tapu Tea. Now we're back in Tahiti. This is a famous site with ancient stone tikis. This is one of the most, on Tahiti, this is a restored marae. Go on to the next slide. You can see this is the backside of the marae, and it's, again, you don't have the megalithic construction like you see in Egypt, but these are pretty impressive, and they were outdoor temples. This is a different style. This is on Wahine, which is in the Leeward Islands, a different style of marae, a sacred site. And then here we are in Easter Island. Thor Heyerdahl, one of my other favorite books was called Aku Aku, Thor Heyerdahl's third book after Fatu Hiva, and he went there and keep going, and did some research. I believe it was like in the late, no, I think it was in the early 1960s he wrote this book. And this quarry called Ranu Raraku, is where they carved the moais, which these figures are called. They carved them in this quarry, and then they moved them. There's all different types of theories on how they moved them. Go on to the next slide. Here's a picture of the side of the quarry. Now, these tikis are just left there abandoned. The theory is that there was a slave class and a ruling class, and after a while, a slave class just said, no, we don't like doing this anymore, and they took over the ruling class. Go on to the next slide. This is the lone moai, which is near the Ranu Raraku quarry, but it's, Thor Heyerdahl in particular liked this tiki because it had a little goatee, the bearded sun god again. No, keep going. And then this would have been, this is about 73 feet tall. This would have been the largest tiki or the largest moai in the world had they pulled it out of this quarry. But you do see how they carve them in situ, in place, and they break through, kind of like what they did in Egypt with the obelisks that we watched yesterday. But they never, it was just left in situ here, probably because they, like I said, the slaves overthrew the ruling class. But you can see there, that's my picture. Well, there I am there, and you can see how big it is. Go on. After the Moai building in Easter Island, they turned to what was called the Birdman cult. Throughout all the islands I've ever gone to, birds are very much respected by the traditional cultures because birds obviously have the ability to fly from island to island, and so the bird image is very important. After the Moai building stopped, which is probably sometime around the 1600s, the island supposedly reverted to this Birdman cult. I don't know if you can see the petroglyphs, but there's a bird carved here. And this is called Arango, which is on one extreme end of the Easter Island. These little Motu rock islands are offshore, and it's a very spiritual place. You could actually, in this shot, you could actually see the curvature of the earth. And you know, this is all these shots I'm using are film. I have not enhanced any of these photographs, but very quickly, the Birdman cult, they had little chieftains all over the island, and once a year they get together, and an adolescent male would be used to compete in the Birdman contest. And what they'd have to do is they'd have to climb down from these rocks, down this real steep face here, that would inevitably get blood on them, and then swim through these shark-infested waters all the way out to the largest Motu, which is about a mile offshore, and they'd have to get the egg of a sacred tern. And they put the egg inside of the headband they'd have around their head, then swim back to the shark-infested waters, and yeah, some of them got eaten by sharks, and then they have to climb back up the face, and the first adolescent male to get an intact egg to the chieftain of their district of the island and hand it to him, that chieftain becomes the Birdman, which is in essence the king of the island. The adolescent male that gets it back to them intact is basically treated like royalty for the rest of their lives, and all the other adolescent males that compete in the contest just get slaughtered.
Is that right? So they were killed?
Yeah.
They killed them. Okay,
Yep.
really?
Yes. This is a famous Easter Island figure called it's also called a Moai. Moai basically in Easter Island means a figure, but this is called Moai Kava, and it's very famous. This is made out of the oceanic rosewood, which is now extinct in Easter Island, but the figure, they think that this comes from a famine, a time when there was no food, and that's why it's so skinny. Let's keep going. Now we're over into Micronesia. This is Yap. Yap's famous for their megalithic stone money. I've been told I only have like about 4 minutes left, so I just want to run through a few more images quickly. Okay. This is one of the Micronesia does not have that much anthropomorphic imagery, but this is called the Tapuano masks. Again, Tapu is in the name of these masks, and they're really neat figures from Yap. Here's one up close. And then here, this is interesting. This is a little effigy, again, Janus. You can see there's a head on the backside, a Janus figure that they would hang on their canoes and supposedly brought the fishermen good luck. And then this is in Yap as well. Yap, they learned a long time ago that to build a successful road, they need irrigation, just like the Romans knew and the Egyptians and a lot of other cultures learned. So consequently, they have roads that are over 1,000 years old, which this is one of. This is the latte stone from Guam, the Mariana Islands, and they're found throughout there. The common explanation of these things, they're found throughout the islands. The common explanation is that there was some sort of stilts for homes, but I think, along with other people in the room, think that they had another more deeper purpose. And then this is an island of Palau. They have large stone uprights there too. Keep going. And then they have fantastic storyboard carving, a very excellent wood carving there. This is a storyboard, basically tells a story. Keep going. This is found all the way over in Palau. It's a sacred stone, but it's amazing because people that are interested in Easter Island archaeology have found this stone. I think that there's somehow a link between Easter Island, which is on one side of the Pacific, and Palau, which is almost to the Philippines, on the other side of the Pacific, because specifically they have these top knots that are the same, almost like the moai and the way the Polynesians wore their traditional hair. This is where I found this upright here, next to another sacred stone. It's a funny story, but I looked all over the island for this, and I went on a hike, and I hiked for at least 5 miles, sweating up this hill, and got thorns in my socks. I just couldn't find it, and so I was all discouraged. I walked all the way back down to my car, and about within an eighth of a mile of my car, right when I thought it was all over, I stumbled on them, and they were all the way down at the bottom of the hill. So I felt pretty lucky to find them. And then this is a monkey man figure from Palau. Again, you see the kneeling Cusio posture, a little bit different hand gestures, but still respect, covering the torso, and pretty unique Tiki-like figure. And then this is an anthropomorphic figure in Palau. You can see the eyes and the nose, the mouth here. And then all over Palau, as with a lot of areas of Micronesia, you get these picture plants, which are the carnivorous plants. And this is the area you can see where the stones are in Palau. And again, the common explanation is that these were ancient foundations of some sort of houses, but I think that they had more significance than that. Now we're into Ponape. I'm going to leave you in Ponape. This is where Edgar Casey or proponents of Lemuria or the lost continent of Mu keep going. Believe that there's an ancient place called Nam Madal. It's this ancient city, again, not known to a lot of people, but there's these ancient ruins in the middle of the Pacific that are pretty phenomenal. And David wrote a great book about Micronesia where he talks about these, but it's just amazing how they moved these stones into place and made this ancient city. Keep going. This is the side. You can see the megalithic construction. It was again, not quite where Peru or Egypt was at, but definitely significant megaliths that a lot of people don't realize are sitting out in the Pacific. This is a similar megalith that are found in Kosarai, which is another Micronesian island, pretty impressive megalithic ancient citadel. Keep going. Really quickly, New Guinea is we're going to stop this thing at, but a lot of the New Guinea figures have the bent leg posture. The interior Sepik region happens to have my favorite primitive art in the world. I just want to run through some of these figures really quickly. This is the Sepik River. which shows you these villages. And one thing about diffusionism, the isolationists, if anywhere in the world there's a good argument for the isolationists or the inventiveness school of humanity, it would be the Sepik, because you have villages within 5 miles of each other along this river, but each village has its own language, its own art, its own cosmology, because there was so much tribal war, and it kind of it blows a lot of the anthropologists' mind, because generally you think if you live near someone, you're going to take on some of their traits through trading. But even when I was just there a couple of years ago, I would walk from one village to another, and everybody would be friendly. They'd walk along with me, and all of a sudden, everybody would stop. I'd be like on my own for, maybe for about an eighth of a mile, and all of a sudden the people from the new village would come out and meet me. There's always like this demarcation of a no man's land because of the tribal war that went on there. The crocodile is very sacred in the Sepik region, the only natural predator of man. And so the fronts of their canoes, where the Tikis were in Polynesia, the crocodile becomes on their canoes. This is another great mask in a sacred longhouse. The mud people are very famous from New Guinea, and this is a great Tiki-like image that this woman carved. And then this is a sacred men's initiation house, again with the Tiki-like anthropomorphic imagery on the back wall. And these boys are actually, they have to stay in this house during their adolescent time when they're turning into men. And this is some of the close-up of the design in the house. I'm probably out of time, but why don't we go ahead and stop?
Yeah, that was good. And we have a few questions and stuff too. You stay here. I want to mention one thing too there, Doug, was that like in Nan Madol and Pohnpei, that one of the legends there is that those giant basalt columns, that they flew them through the air and levitated and put them there. That's their thing. Doug also has a trip coming up to the Marquesas and stuff like that. And he has a flyer.
Yeah, I have a flyer. If anybody's interested, next October, we're going to go to, it's an incredible deal. We're going to go to 3 island groups, the Society Islands, the Tuamotu Islands, and the Marquesas Islands. And it's all expense paid. It's very reasonable. All your food and airfare from Los Angeles is included. So I have these flyers. Anybody that wants one, just come and see me.
We have a minute, yeah. Is there any questions? One thing about tattoos, too, and I know tattoo, you were saying, is a Marquesan word, but also they think that tattooing originated in Egypt. And that, also in the Bedouins and stuff like that, in the deserts. Also the women, they tattoo their faces. And
I'm just saying that the word originated there.
Definitely
tattooing is,
yes. Right. But I'm just making that connection to ancient Egypt.
Right.
That, the tattooing was something that went on there in the, the Arabian deserts.
David has an incredible book in his catalog that he actually forced me to buy, but I'm so glad he forced me to buy it. It's by this guy named Perry, the Children of the...
Children of the Sun.
The Children of the Sun is all about how Egyptians were in the Pacific. It's a fascinating book written in the 1920s by a very early diffusionist, and it's not an easy read. You probably only read about 10 or 20 pages at a time, but there's...
It's all about the Egyptians, basically, and Indians from India going out into the Pacific and settling the Pacific. It was written by a professor of University of Manchester, actually. Well, it's a great book on going out there.
John White, who's written a book about Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Sure. So we have this. This is one of our reprints with Adventures Unlimited, and it's only been out about a year or so. That was good, Doug. Hey,
great.
Another hand.
Thanks.